Hello, I'm Paul Leger. I'm teaching at the Graduate School of Law at Nagoya University, Japan, which is located on the east side of Japan, on the main island of Honshu. And the title of my presentation is Academic Writing and Remote Learning in the Age of COVID. And this study encompasses a qualitative study that looks at students' perspectives on their remote learning experience. These are graduate students in our department. So just a little bit of context at our university. This is a picture of our central campus. Our building would be located on the far left. In the Graduate School of Law, we basically, while we had students from abroad prior to 1988, we started an international program that included a large number of students from different countries on various scholarship programs. So presently, 85% of our students actually come from abroad. That is, they're not Japanese. These are students that come mainly from Southeast Asia and China, but some come from Eastern European countries and the Middle East and South America as well. They enter on two tracks, so they can enter on a Japanese track. About 25% of them do, which means that they'll take courses in Japanese and write their thesis and dissertation in Japanese. And about 75% are on the English track, which means that they, of course, will write their thesis and dissertation in English as well, taking courses in English. I'm involved, of course, with these particular students on this track, and this could be anywhere between 25 to, say, 35 students per year. It just depends. So when it comes to remote learning, I think we can say this goes back to, say, 2013 from when we actually started working with a lot of long distance students, students that don't necessarily have the ability to come to our campus, but we've also experimented with various forms of, say, hybrid online courses. For this study, we're looking at two groups. That is one group that has a sample of six doctoral students from 5 countries who are in the asynchronous aspects of remote learning. These are students that learn at different times and aren't necessarily communicating a live situation. Supposedly this is more convenient and flexible. I think we'll see that this is true. And allows them to work at their own time, as opposed to the students who are mainly in the synchronous program or synchronous aspect of remote learning, where they are in class at the same time, it's occurring real time, and supposedly more engaging and effective, and this was our central concern. It allows supposedly for instant feedback and clarification. I think you can see at the bottom the sort of general understanding of technology we use, which is for synchronous learning, video conferencing, live chatting, stream videos. And for the asynchronous, we actually use, say, more email screencasting and other aspects of technology. So designing for remote learning is somewhat different than, as you would expect, from, say, face-to-face class or even typical online classes. And of course, the first thing you have to consider is your own course objectives, what discipline you're in, and how you're going to apply your, say, syllabus or objectives to integrate with the technology that you're using. And you, of course, just like any other course, whether it's face-to-face or online, you have to consider the environment, skills, habits, and motivations of the students, and integrate this, say, with the overall framework or design of your remote class, and consider the accessibility of the technology, and of course its reliability, and then how well all of this meets, say, the immediate needs of your students. In our case, we're dealing with students who will be writing theses and dissertations, and so I am mainly focused on academic writing at this level. And so I had to consider these 5 questions. What's the effective climate of writing that we're going to have to establish in this sort of framework or platform? What are the best practices, say, that we can apply to, say, effective writing instruction at this level? What content that we will use, because I think the sort of form of interaction that you have in, say, the face-to-face class or online is going to be somewhat different. What are the best tasks that you can apply, and what choices I have to make in terms of, say, technology and also, direct content material. I'm sure many of you are familiar with this term TPACK. This is sort of the balancing or integrating aspects that you'll have to bring together to make sure that knowledge is shared in your class. The key is, of course, making sure that the class is the most effective in terms of enabling students to share in the knowledge that you want to give. So in our case, for example, the pedagogical approach would be it's sort of a social interactive approach that looks at genre and writing in the discipline, as opposed to, say, other forms of academic writing. And then, of course, the content that we're applying is mainly content that involves certainly some aspects of remedial work that the students need, but also elaboration that they'll have to use and meet the needs of the faculty who want a clear and coherent thesis and dissertation. And of course, technology. There is some technology that you'll have to both set as a framework, but also help students get through to make sure that they can work the technology effectively in their class. There are disadvantages, say, compared to typical face-to-face classes. In terms of the synchronous learning, then the instructor and learner must be on at the same time. While that's certainly similar to face-to-face, the difference is time zones. You're going to have time zone differences that you have to consider, and so you may have to work with students with certain needs. Students can be in certain crisis situations. For example, I have several students from Myanmar and Ethiopia, and they're dealing with personal issues in terms of their home countries and so on. So these are things that you have to work with. It requires technology on both sides, some learning curves that you have to deal with. Of course, it requires the establishment of the infrastructure. This can take a great deal of time on the instructor side in terms of making sure that things are reliable and work consistently through the course. Learners have to keep more on pace, say, than a typical course. And of course, the instructor's presence is very key to the effectiveness of this type of learning, as we'll see. For the asynchronous, then learners may feel somewhat disconnected, although in our situation, I think it's not an overbearing concern. Most of the students understand the situation that they are in, and this is what they've elected to do. The key is to make it a little bit more feeling that the instructor is involved. It does require higher levels of self-motivation. There can be delays in feedback, although I think we've put a lot of emphasis in making sure that the delay is not that long. And of course, the instructor presence is going to be much less than face-to-face. So looking at the technology in the synchronous environment that we have, so this is what you might see, for example, from your perspective as an instructor, the classroom setting in its sort of boxed form on a laptop or PC. And on the left here, the technologies or softwares that the students will have to actually learn. Of course, Canvas is our learning management system, and the students do have to learn some elements of this in order to be able to access and get through certain, say, in other words, get through the syllabus or the assignments. We use a software program developed in Pearson Education called My Writing Lab, which serves as sort of a textbook to meet some of their remedial needs. For example, learning about punctuation, grammar, syntax, basic writing process, and so on. These are things that I think are sort of the fundamentals that students have to learn. And of course, they have to learn the technology. And then, of course, Zoom, which is not that difficult at first. The students may feel uncomfortable with that at first, but they get through that relatively easy. I think there's a lot more time investment, say, in Canvas and Pearson. On the right here are various software that the instructors have to lay as at least what I use as a framework to make my courses a little bit more interactive. So I develop, say, interactive videos and visuals through these softwares, which I place into Canvas so they can see as a pre-lesson. These are both free at the basic level. If you have a budget, it is worth upgrading to the premium level. I also use Google Slides as a way to formulate the syllabus and place it into Canvas. This allows me to inject personal videos, which I may make through YouTube. So it's very efficient in terms of being able to share things. ideas both in terms of the class and my own personal, say, presence. I can put in my a simple biography, introduction to the course. I can give plenty of examples. I can show actually writing examples and discuss them. And like I said, I do use YouTube, both in terms of making videos and presenting other videos. However, there are problems. For example, students from China don't necessarily have equal access due to certain government restrictions in their country, and so you have to learn how to work around this. So these are some of the things that I actually use, and you can see that it's technologically heavy. Compared to the asynchronous environment, then it would be much more individualized and one-on-one. I think there's a lot less investment in terms of the student side. For example, I do use screencasting software, and this allows me to give, say, oral comments as well as written feedback to the student, which they can retrieve on their own time at any time. And I think that they find this actually quite good. I also use, of course, general emails to communicate back and forth. This helps a lot, great deal, with, say, immediate needs. We use Microsoft Teams sometimes, excuse me, to help with sharing documents and working with documents together. I think the exchange in this type of software is really good, and it really helps a lot when the text is a lot larger, and you have to go through a great deal more of their work. And of course, we do use Zoom as well for real quick, immediate meetings that I would say less than 30 minutes. And I try to record a lot of these things as well. And that's what's one of the good things about this type of software. Most of this type of software is that it allows for a sort of library that the student can access on their own time. But I think you can see the difference here is that there's much less investment in the student side in terms of understanding or working with technology compared to the synchronous course. So our central question then in this study was how the two different groups of students evaluate their remote experience versus, say, previous online courses and face-to-face classes that they may have had in the past. And the themes that we were concerned with, of course, is how they perceived or felt about the environment in the remote learning, skills, habits, and motivation, as well as design, accessibility, reliability in terms of meeting their immediate needs. So these were some of the themes that we were looking for. And results. So these were the positive results. When looking at skills and habits and motivation, the results were positive in that both groups felt that the remote learning experience was as good as or better than, say, online and face-to-face learning. It just depends, but in general, most of them felt that, particularly the asynchronous group, which had a lot more individualized attention. In terms of design, reliability, and need, both groups felt that it was much better than previous online classes, which often gave them a feeling of, say, isolation, working in a silo sort of situation. And I think that they appreciated the effort that's put into remote learning. The asynchronous members felt it was better than face-to-face, but again, I think this has to do with the fact that they get more individualized attention. Whereas the synchronous members felt it was equal to face-to-face. That is, it was just as good as face-to-face, but better than online. In terms of the mixed results, in terms of the themes of accessibility, the asynchronous members felt it was better than online, but equal to face-to-face. So again, this has to do with the fact that they can work more closely with an individualized supervisor. Actually, in terms of the face-to-face, which tend to sometimes give a feeling of more not having the access, whereas the synchronous members felt it was better than online but less than face-to-face, again, because, as I said earlier, they have to deal with a lot more technological issues in terms of both learning and dealing with certain issues that might frustrate them. For example, when there are problems with certain technology, they have to spend time and effort either trying to learn on their own or trying to contact me, which they often feel guilty about because they feel it's an interference in my time. And of course, the environment. The asynchronous members felt it was better than online, but equal to face-to-face. They didn't necessarily feel that the environment was that much different, but they didn't have as much concern or interest in anymore in face-to-face. They certainly felt it was better than online, where they again have a feeling of isolation, whereas synchronous members felt it was better than online but less than face-to-face. That is, this is the group, this is the key thing here, is that the synchronous members felt that the remote learning was not as good as the face-to-face, but this mostly had to do with the fact that they had less interaction with other students. This was not about instructor presence as much as it was just a feeling of, say, being in a cubicle and not being able to have a little bit more spontaneity in a classroom, say with other students. They also felt like that there was a lot more interference, say, than a typical face-to-face. That is, there were external distractions that inhibited some of their concentration. However, they do like it better than online because of the fact that I recorded everything and I allowed students to go back and review any sort of classroom situation. So in this sense, they actually find that the environment is better than online. So in conclusion, as Beth Hewitt has noted, a lot of this, whether you're talking about online or long distance or remote learning, the key is presence, both the instructor presence and the sense of community you can build in the classroom. This is an iterative process. It requires constant sort of tweaking of your courses. I use peer reviews, for example. This is one of the benefits of teaching a writing course, doing peer review work, as well as sometimes using the breakout rooms in the Zoom to sort of get students to do some work. The students tend to think of writing as an individualized sort of learning, so they're not as usual as in terms of thinking of it as interactive, a social interactive process. So it's probably less, say, critical than you would find maybe in some other disciplines where they expect things to be a little bit more interactive. So, for example, in, say, a social science class where you expect more conversation between students. But still, the overall sense was that the sense of community needed to be a little bit more developed, and that's what we're going to be working on from henceforth. So I thanks for Melta, and thanks for your time. I hope you appreciated the presentation. If you have any any questions or concerns, please contact me at the email address listed below or on the front slide. These are my references. If you have time, I do recommend Scott Warnock and Beth Hewitt's books mainly dealing with online teaching, but I think they're just as important and effective and would be helpful if you're developing remote learning, because I think a lot of what they're saying is applicable to both. Again, I appreciate your time. Thank you.